Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 2 of the Interpretation Station. What an episode we've got lined up for you today. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So, today we're doing something a bit different. We were doing French in episode 1 with the Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, today in episode 2, we're going to be doing some Mexico. Mexico from the Human Rights Council from the 26th of February this year in Geneva. So I guess it was just before all this COVID business started. But I imagine we're going to have it's probably going to get mentioned. As I say, he's our man, if you see her on the screen. He is the Director General of Human Rights, I guess, in the Mexican government, Dr. Christopher Reinas Valdez, high-level segment of the 43rd regular session of the Human Rights Council. So the Human Rights Council, it takes place, they meet twice a year in Geneva. Funnily enough, they're meeting right now as we speak. And this is basically a chance for the ministers from the various countries to come over from capital, or at least they did in the old days. That's how it worked in the old days. The ministers were allowed to travel back then, not like now, eh? And it basically gives them an opportunity to just sort of trot out all their outstanding achievements in human rights. So we'll probably be discussing the various treaty bodies, the various conventions that Mexico has signed up to. Again, to remind you, Convention Against Torture, Enforced Disappearance. Those are going to be two probably quite important ones with respect to Mexico. Enforced disappearance, the whole issue of missing persons. I mean, if you follow the news at all, you'll know that over the last few years there have been a number of cases. And Mexico is quite a big player generally in the Human Rights Council. It puts forward lots of initiatives there. It's both a big player there in terms of initiatives and a big player in terms of being at the butt end of quite a bit of criticism for various reasons, with the corruption, various cases in certain states of Mexico. There was some case I know a few years ago, a whole bunch of students, 30 or 40 students, were, I think, I might not be 100% certain. I think they were murdered by representatives of the state or local government, and it caused that was a big deal. It was a big deal. So, but generally, at least, the Mexicans put forward they're very proactive when it comes, at least vocally proactive when it comes to promoting human rights. So, so this was sent in to me by a colleague of mine, a freelancer, Kerry. So she's looking to maybe add Spanish in the next couple of years, I guess. So we'll see how she does. We'll keep the usual format. So you'll see in front of you here is the statement, and then I've got Kerry's recording on hand, and then I'll be stopping the tape here and there to correct her or offer suggestions and so on. All right, so without any further ado, I think let's get started, eh?
Mexico in this Human Rights Council session.
Just one second, I need to just rewind to the beginning. Okay.
It is an honor for me to represent Mexico in this Human Rights Council session and to reaffirm our commitment to multilateralism.
Okay, so that first paragraph's pretty straightforward. One interesting word here, perhaps. Refrendar. So she said, did she say reiterate? So yeah, it's reiterate, emphasize our commitment. Compromiso. I don't want that can sometimes be a bit of a false friend from in Spanish. So our commitment to multilateralism.
A year ago, at the same forum, the government of Mexico presented the principles of its transformative multilateral policy based on strict respect for human rights.
Okay, that's good. One interesting word here again. Oh, yeah, so she said transformadora. I'd say that's good. Transformative multilateral policy. Basada en el respeto irrestricto. So that's, you want to be saying the unswerving, unstinting respect. Kerry, she said, I think she's, well, I can't remember what she said. Let me just see what she said again.
Mexico presented the principles of its transformative multilateral policy based on strict respect for human rights.
Oh, so she just went for the strict, and that's fine. Strict is right. But so it's always good to have that collection of those words, though, like unflinching, unstinting, steadfast. I like steadfast as well. For any of you guys who do Russian, for example, постоянно, постоянно is steadfast. It's always a good one to have.
Today, although we recognise the enormous challenges our country is facing, I wish to share with you some of the progress made in this area.
This is all good. This is all good. Share with you some of the progress registrado en la materia, is made in that field, in that area.
First, as a demonstration of the new government's commitment to the international human rights agenda,
Una muestra, okay, she says a demonstration of the commitment to the new government. Maybe you can just say a sign, just as a sign of the commitment to the new government.
we received the visit of the High Commissioner in April, and we signed 2 cooperation agreements which are being implemented. One, to receive advice and technical assistance in the Commission for the Ayotzinapa case, and the other for human rights capacity building for the National Guard.
Okay. So this is pretty good here. So the High Commissioner, that's obviously of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights it's referring to. We signed 2 cooperation agreements that are being implemented. That's all good. Yeah, assessoria, that's advice. Advice, technical assistance. So he skips this bit, en la Comisión Presidencial para la Verdad y Acceso a la Justicia en el caso Ayotzinapa. Now, I believe that Ayotzinapa case, that may be the one I was actually referring to a few moments ago. Let me just check that. This is exactly the case I was referring to, I think. Yeah. Back, that's it. So here on Wikipedia, if you can see. So 43 male students from the Ayotzinapa College were forcibly abducted and then disappeared in Iguala. So that is that big high-profile case that I was talking about. Okay. Let's carry on. It's a good one for myself to remember Ayotzinapa, because as you can see, I didn't recognize it first, and it's an important one if you're working in this. Well, with anything to do with Mexico, that's a very big case. All right, let's go on.
Together with families and civil society organizations, this will be my second point, we are strengthening and relaunching the national search system for disappeared persons.
Okay, there's a couple of interesting things here. Civil society, organizaciones de la sociedad civil. Tell you what, that's if you're in a hurry having to do that, organización, CSOs. If they mention them more than once in a quick statement, this guy I've done the speed of delivery is pretty sort of regular standard, but it's a useful one just to have in your pocket to know. You can call CSOs. The National System de Búsqueda, search. That's the solution you want there. She said now para de personas desaparecidas. So she did disappeared persons. It's easy to say missing persons, perhaps. Missing persons is possibly the expression that we're more familiar with in English. Now, there is actually a bit of a nuance because in the Committee on Enforced Disappearance, they do talk about disappeared persons as opposed to missing persons. The difference being is a missing person, they've gone missing. We don't know where they are. We don't know how they went missing. A disappeared person is someone who's actually been made to disappear. So the agents, security agents of some kind or whatever, have basically kidnapped, abducted them. So there is a bit of a nuance there that the Committee on Enforced Disappearance is they're quite particular about that, because for them their mandate covers those who have been forcibly disappeared as opposed to just those who've gone missing. So just bear that in mind.
And we have approved the creation of an extraordinary mechanism for forensic identity.
Okay, so carrying on.
Rather. Both actions will help us make progress towards eradicating enforcement. Together with families and civil society organizations, this will be my second point, we are strengthening and relaunching the national search system for disappeared persons. And we have approved the creation of an extraordinary mechanism for forensic identification. Both actions will help us make progress towards eradicating enforced disappearances and disappearances committed by individuals.
Okay, so desaparición forzada. So it's enforced disappearance. And again, just another hint that when again that term is appearing frequently, you can use ed. If you're in trouble, if you're in a hurry, you can just say ed. And yes, it's por particulares. So by individual. Let's go on.
On the basis of diagnosis made by the OHCHR, third point, since the end of 2019, we have worked to strengthen the rights of human rights defenders and journalists.
Okay, so Alta Comisionada, the High Commissioner. Oh, sorry, la Oficina de la Alta Comisionada. So in English, we can call it OHCHR, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. That tends to be the quickest way to rattle it off, OHCHR. So we're working to strengthen, the mechanism to protect defensoras de derechos humanos. Standard way to render this is human rights defenders, periodistas, of course, journalists.
I wish to repeat the government of Mexico's firm commitment to protecting all persons who protect human rights and journalists whose work we recognize and value.
Okay, I don't know if the speaker perhaps went slightly off text there. Here in the text, aprovecho para reiterar el firme repudio del gobierno. So the firm, repudiation, the firm rejection. You could say the condemnation of the government of Mexico for any aggression, any attack against human rights defenders and journalists. Okay.
Fourth, we are working to build the capacity of the authorities responsible for managing the unusually.
Okay, I'll just move the page on. So that's a fortalecimiento de las capacidades, capacity building the capacities. Okay, para atender los flujos inusuales de migrantes que siguen cruzando nuestro país. So let's just see how Kerry did that little section.
To protect human rights and journalists whose work we recognize and value. Fourth, We are working to build the capacity of the authorities responsible for managing the unusually high flows of migrants coming through our country.
Okay, unusually, if you have high flows in migrants, cool. All right, go on.
Given the enormous challenge of giving this thorough attention, Mexico is maintaining its policy of protecting and respecting the human rights of migrants.
This is all good. This is all good. Cabal atención, full attention, yeah. Everything else is good, as I say.
To ensure that migration is voluntary and not forced, Mexico is implementing the Integral Development Program, which sees participation from UN agencies, coordinated by the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean.
All right, just a couple of things here. Again, this is good. To ensure that migration is a voluntary and not a forced act. Okay, whenever you hear this integral in Spanish or in French for that matter, the best translation tends to be comprehensive development plan. Then he mentions here, la Comisión Económica para América Latina y el Caribe. So that is the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, otherwise known as ECLAC. So that's a fairly well-known acronym that you feel free to use. There's a couple of others at the UN. You see there's ECOWAS. There's a number of these economic commissions. You see ECOWAS, which is the Economic Commission for West Africa. You have ECAS, Economic Commission for Central Africa. Yeah, there's a few of these, and you can use the acronyms. They're pretty well known: ECLAC, ECOWAS, ECAS, and so on.
And this is currently co-financed by several countries. Our goal is for migration to be safe, orderly, and regular.
That's a sort of triumvirate. This is a bit of a cliche, sort of set phrase for when talking about migration: safe, orderly, and regular. Those three tend to come as a package. All right.
Fifth, convinced of the importance of openness and continued international scrutiny and dialogue with the Universal Inter-American Human Rights System.
Okay, so the big on the Inter-American human rights system. The Latin American countries will often refer to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights and generally the Inter-American human rights system. So you have the universal system, which sort of I guess is spearheaded by the UN, and then you have the Inter-American system.
We have an electronic system which systemizes the 15,000 recommendations we've received from international bodies since 1995 to give them better follow-up and implementation.
Okay, an electronic herramienta, maybe a tool would be a better word. An electronic tool systemizes almost 3,500 recommendations. Okay, she said 95. Here it says 94. So I'm not certain if she maybe just got the year wrong. Mejora la atención and seguimiento de las mismas. Yeah, attention given, attention and follow-up. Seguimiento, follow-up.
This is presented here today to demonstrate the work Mexico is doing, and we hope it will be an example of best practice. Sixth.
Okay, I mean perhaps, so yeah, she skipped this. So this word herramienta, so tool, that's an important word to know generally. They often talk about tools figuratively. The state has at its disposal. And model of best practices, we'd probably say in English would be modelo de buenas prácticas.
On the 21st of January, Mexico ratified the Inter-American Convention against all forms of discrimination and intolerance, and we joined the Inter-American Convention against racism, racial discrimination, and related forms of intolerance.
Okay, so looking here, adhirió a la Convención Interamericana contra il racismo. She said that we joined the convention. I would prefer something like we signed up to, we subscribed to, we acceded to. Join is okay. And this is again these packages over here. Racismo, discriminación racial y formas conexas de intolerancia, racism, racial discrimination, related or connex, associated forms of intolerance.
This year, we hope to conclude the parameters to accede to the ILO Convention 189 on domestic workers and the Escazu Agreement. Similarly,
I think she got a bit confused here with this word tramites. She made what would be called in Alice in Wonderland a portmanteau word. The protamities, I think she said. I think she so proceed. You can say the procedures or the formalities. So she put those two together. So yeah, you can see one or the other, the procedures or the formalities for ratification of Convention 189. Organización Internacional del Trabajo is the ILO. This is a convention that frequently gets referred to. It's a good one to know, domestic workers, and as is this agreement referred to here, the Escazu Agreement, which I must admit, off the top of my head, I cannot remember what it is about. Let's have a quick look. Okay, there we go. The Regional Agreement on Access to Information, Public Participation, Justice in Environmental Matters, the Escazu Agreement. By the way, just since I'm here, see this CEPAL? Okay, that is ECLAC in Spanish if ever you happen to run into it. Okay, Comisión Económica para América Latina, CEPAL. So in case the Spanish ever use it, and they do, by the way, you want to know that that's ECLAC. Okay, let's go on.
we extended an invitation to the Special Rapporteur on Trafficking Persons and on IDPs so that they can visit our country. Both visits will take place this year, 8th. Given
this was all good. So la trata de personas is human trafficking. Desplazados internos, IDPs. So it's all good. So carry on here for number 8 now. We've come to
the enormous challenges Mexico is facing in protecting the rights of women, the government has adopted a feminist foreign policy to orient our foreign policy actions to reduce and eliminate structural differences, gaps, and gender discrimination.
pretty good. Couple of things maybe just to point out. Okay, so there's Política Exterior Feminista. Like she said, feminist foreign policy. I think that's now sort of a set phrase. I think the Canadians were the first to use it. So now everyone says they've got a feminist foreign policy now. Para orientar las acciones gubernamentales. She said orient. It's okay. I'm not a big fan of to orient in English. I think better to guide. So you get it here, in fact, don't you? To steer government policy, government action. So to eliminate structural differences, gaps, and gender inequalities. Okay.
In so doing, Mexico became the first Latin American country to launch a policy of this type. We work closely with UN Women and the CEDAW Committee to...
Slight error there in tense. Trabajaremos. So we will be working closely. We will be working
to reach the highest human rights standards for this segment of the population, which is legitimately claiming full respect for their rights.
I'm just going to play that little section again. I missed the start of it, so if I just rewind a couple of seconds.
We work closely with UN Women and the CEDAW Committee to reach the highest human rights standards for this segment of the population, which is legitimately claiming full respect for their rights. Similarly,
Okay, so just a couple of, just for general knowledge purposes, ONU Mujeres, UN Women, Comité CEDAW, if you're not familiar with the treaty bodies, CEDAW, Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, same in Spanish as you can see, to reach the highest human rights standards. Yeah, and this little expression, atender a ese sector de la población, atender, yeah, to address the needs of this, atender, to take care of this sector of the population. Sometimes I don't know if there's really one single word in English that you can do, atender este sector, to take care of, I think maybe. Quien reclama legítimamente el pleno respeto a sus derechos, which legitimately claims full respect for their rights, okay?
given the enormous gender challenges that we need to tackle, and as part of the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Programme of Action.
Okay, so there's atender again. So here she said tackle, and here it works fine. Yeah, it's the word they use a lot. Aware of major challenges, yeah, global perspective. Okay, let's change the page. En el marco del 25th aniversario de la Declaración Plataforma de Acción de Beijing. It's a very famous milestone whenever they speak about gender. Beijing Platform for Action and the Beijing Declaration. So if you do any of these committees on women's rights and whatever, you're going to hear that a lot. The Beijing Platform for Action.
Mexico and France will be co-hosting the Equality Generation Forum in May and June, where we hope to set the stage for the next generation. And we cordially extend our invitation to you to attend this event.
Just a couple of things here in that paragraph. Mayo y julio próximo. So she rightly just said in May and July. So if you're in a year in January, she's not. If you're in January 2020, when they say Mayo and julio próximo, it's the upcoming May and July. It's not of next year. This is something in French as well that can sometimes throw people. They think it's the following year. It's just the next one that's coming along. I think in English, if we were speaking February, I think if we were to be talking about what was going to happen in May, the one that was coming up, we would just say in May. If we were to say next May, next July, we'd be referring to the following year. But in Spanish and French, that próximo just means this is the one that's coming up. So it's just a small thing, but it's useful to know. And we extend a cordial invitation to attend this. What did she say for celebración? This event? Was that what she said?
As part of the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Programme of Action, Mexico and France will be co-hosting the Equality Generation Forum in May and June, where we hope to set the stage for the next generation. And we cordially extend our invitation to you to attend this event. Madam Vice President.
Yeah, this event, that's right. I think she got the word género, she got confused and put on generation. For the next, el siguiente decenio, the next decade.
The HRC is the ideal forum to find shared responses to shared human rights challenges.
Okay, Madam President. Okay, the HRC, so that's a perfectly legitimate acronym to use there for the Human Rights Council. Idoneo is like in French, idoine, so the right, the most appropriate forum for finding solutions to common challenges.
And we are convinced of its importance and committed to strengthening it. With this conviction, we submit our candidacy to be Vice President of GRULAC this year, and we submit our candidacy to be elected to the Human Rights Council for 2021 to 2023.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think should say present our candidacy. I think we'd submit our candidacy. Actually, I think at the UN, somebody once told me, candidatura in the UN, you say candidature, as opposed to you got candidature and you got candidacy. Apparently, the UN, the right one is candidature, as opposed to candidacy, but small, very, very small point. Okay, for re-election to the council for the period 21-2023. Okay.
Mexico will continue to work to promote the rights of Indigenous persons, the abolition of the death penalty, to promote the rights of persons with disabilities, human rights in war and terrorism, privacy in the digital era, and the elimination of all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls.
Okay, just a couple. All this is correct. Just a couple of points of interest. Indigenous peoples, pueblos indígenas. Could you use the acronym IPs? Same goes for here. Los derechos de las personas con discapacidad, persons with disabilities. PWDs. I have done in the past. I'll say that. Again, you gotta. It's a matter of your own discretion, really. If you're getting bombarded with lots of words at a real high speed, and you've used those words before, I think it's legitimate that you can slip into IPs, PWDs. I've got a feeling. I think certainly the person with disabilities. There've been occasional, not complaints made. I don't think they like being referred to as PWDs. But when it's real force majeure, I think you can get away with it. El combate al terrorismo, the set phrase for that is countering terrorism. I say fighting terrorism, but all the agreements are about countering terrorism. Discriminación y violencia contra mujeres y niñas. So the Spanish will tend to women and girls anyway. They'll tend to say them together.
The rights of children, the elimination of violence and discrimination on the basis of sexual identity, and against persons belonging to other minorities. We will also...
Okay, I think that was pretty good. Discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. Those two separate things, sexual orientation and gender identity. And los derechos de las personas pertenecientes a minorías. You could just say persons from minority groups, for example, people from minorities. If you want to try and shorten it a little bit.
So continue participating in the Universal Periodic Review with a constructive spirit of cooperation, with the principles of good faith and sovereign equality and international cooperation.
Okay, one important thing she misses here. This is very important in the context of talking about this examen periódico universal. So it's called the Universal Periodic Review, the UPR. Every member state undergoes it. It's a big review of everything they've done in the field of human rights, compliance with conventions, and so on. I mean, usually a big ministerial delegation will attend those UPRs, and it's a peer-reviewed process. That's a very important phrase to know in that respect. Cooperación entre pares. I think in French it's entre pairs. So pares is peers. It's all about peer review, you know. Countries talking about their fellow countries, you know. It's a peer review. Al amparo de los principios de buena fe, igualdad soberana y cooperación internacional. So al amparo is like, I can't remember what she said here. I think she said here based on the principles of good faith, which is fine in this context. Al amparo tends to mean under the auspices, under the aegis. There's quite a few different solutions you could go for here. In step with the principles, consistent with the principles of good faith, etc. It's a word you hear a lot. Not to be confused, by the way, since we're not talking about these human rights treaty bodies, in the Latin American judicial system, there is a legal instrument called el amparo, which is referred to a lot when countries are doing their reviews in the various treaty bodies, and they're referring to various cases, and they'll say that such and such, you received an amparo. So it's a specific ruling in the Latin American court system, and you just translate it as amparo, just in case.
I wish to conclude with a call for support, and by supporting rather the call for action from the Secretary General to achieve the founding values of the UN of peace, security and development.
Okay, so she gets this bit close enough. So I'll conclude by making a call to support the El Llamado de Acción. I guess it was a call for action, an official call for action for human rights from the Secretary General, which will contribute to making a reality of the foundational goals of the UN, peace, security and development. Hacer realidad. Bring to fruition, achieve the founding goals, make a reality of the founding goals, delivering on the founding goals, something like that.
This is the only way that future generations and we ourselves will be truly free and equal in dignity and rights. I thank you.
Okay, so that's the end. So that's a good effort there from Kerry. So it's a very sort of run of the mill ministerial statement at a meeting like this. Very broad political strokes and all that. It's a good sort of one to practice, you know, just to get so familiar with the standard expressions. So if there was any, you know, if I had to highlight anything from here, a couple of my sort of big takeaways from this text in terms of, let's say, vocab. Actually, just before giving you my main big takeaways, one thing perhaps I should have just pointed out earlier. So when the Mexicans are putting forward their candidature for GRULAC, so GRULAC is the group of Latin American and Caribbean countries at the UN. It's a big group within the UN, and they're just called GRULAC. So yeah, that covers, you know, it's all the Latin Americans plus, yeah, I think Jamaica, Barbados, they're in it as well, the Caribbean countries. Okay, so yeah, just the things I'd really highlight after this. Yeah, remember that. I'm gonna do this myself, in fact, this Ayotzinapa, make a note of that case. That's a really it's a really important case, the Ayotzinapa massacre, or whatever you want to call it. So there's that. There was the peer review. That's an important concept to remember. Cooperación entre pares, peer review. yeah, and those are the main things. Those are the main things. A couple of interesting acronyms to toy with, as I say. They'll use them carefully. IPs for Indigenous people, BWDs, person with disability. And also, it's good to know this countering terrorism. That's a standard set phrase. Okay, so hope you found that useful, Kerry, and anybody else who might by some miracle be watching. Before I finish, I've got to go through these. I've got to remember to tell you to make sure you subscribe. So press the subscribe. Smash the thumbs up button. Give me a like. In the description box, I'm going to put a link to this text. I'm going to put a link to the original text. The Mexican gentleman himself speaking in the meeting. And my advice, if you want to do this, is record yourself. Record yourself. I should have maybe said this at the start of the video, but record yourself doing the statement. Find the link to the original. Do it. Download a copy of the text, and then you can then watch me going through it. Make notes. And that's the best way to benefit from this, I think. Okay, so with that, gotta finish off with my catchphrase at the end. So, what was it again? Get on the language train. The ride's for free if you get off at the interpretation station. I've really got to work on that. Okay, bye-bye.